Right. Just want to say good evening to all. We are streaming, we are live. Welcome everyone to our African American Mental Health Emphasis Month. We have our program here for this week. We have a pretty good lineup for each evening. Dr. Alan Martin will be our presenter tonight. Tomorrow evening, we will have Elder Herbert Boyd from the Pequot Nation. And then on Thursday, we will have Dr. Marita Hodge, which will do her presentation as well. So just want to welcome Dr. Martin from the Northeastern Conference of Seventh day Adventists. He's also the former pastor of the Mount Olive Seventh day Adventist Church. So we just want to welcome you, want to say thank you for taking the time out in your inundated schedule to join us this evening to present your presentation on African American male and mental health. So let's open up with a word of prayer, and then Dr. Martin, we will turn it over to you. So every head is bowed and eyes are closed. Loving Father, we just say thank you for this evening, for this day, Lord, in which you've kept us. We just pray now, Father, that you'll be with us during this program. God, that you will be with Dr. Martin, be with his presentation, and may your Holy Spirit lead and guide throughout this evening. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen and amen. So, all you, Dr. Martin.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm certainly delighted to be with you on this evening. It has been a very hectic period for me in the past few weeks. You know, I'm getting ready to retire. I told you all that when I was in New London, and I've got 35, 40 years worth of stuff stored in where I'm staying, and packing this and packing that and moving things around. And, it's been hectic. So that's why I'm just a little out of sorts, not myself. I told that to Pastor, you know, but you asked me to come. So I said, well, I cannot disappoint Mount of Olives. I decided to come to be with you on this evening. I want to commend you as a church for looking at this very important topic, this whole matter of mental health and the African American community, because it is certainly something that is quite relevant, very necessary for our church to develop serious interests in this matter, because in the past, that has not been the case. And in my circles, as public affairs and realistically director for the conference, I find it very intriguing now when I go to meetings with our civic leaders, governors, mayors, and so forth, as they are looking at their agenda and what they want to do for their state, for the city. I'm noticing that they're placing mental health on the agenda. And I've seen this before, but they're placing it on the agenda, and they're also attempting to budget serious money towards this particular area, because it's very important that we look at this in ways that we haven't in the past. This evening, the topic that I was assigned is to look at what is happening with our African American male population as it relates to this mental health matter. Okay. And so I want to start with looking at some clinical facts and issues in regards to this. And then from there, we'll kind of dive into the practice of it. Okay. So, Doc, if you could just start that with me, as we got Black men and the present mental health crisis. Not so fast. That's fine. Okay, no, we can go to the first slide. Yeah, go. Yeah. As we are aware, we know, we probably hear it all the time, that there's so much going on with in terms of African American men. Whenever we look at statistical data, it's always disturbing to me that when it comes to the African American male population, we're always on the lowest rung of the ladder. If there's anything going on, whether it's sickness, ailment, issue, you look at the stats, everybody else will be up here, and you'll find the black male somewhere down at the bottom. Every time. That's normally what you see. And in my research, as I was doing some of my own clinical studies, that's what I discovered. I'm pretty sure those of you on here who you've read and studied, you see that as well. African Americans, particularly men, face unique societal pressures that others don't experience. This includes increased exposure to racism, violence, and discrimination. We'll come back to that. Those three things we face that actually cause us and impact our mental health. While we've made great strides in the last 50 years, many Black individuals continue to be perceived or treated as less than because of their skin color, which can intensify feelings of depression and be detrimental to their mental or emotional health. In fact, numerous studies show the adverse physical and psychological effects of racism, which has been found to be predictive in post-traumatic stress disorder like symptoms and poorer health outcomes. And I have to say, I'm glad this writer has put out that 50 years we've made great strides. Fact of the matter is, for a long time, the unique making great strides. Fact of the matter is, okay, you hear me? The fact of the matter is, for a long time, the unique specific conditions that Black male face has not really been studied or looked at. Okay. About 20 years ago, I was working on my doctorate, and I had a challenging time trying to find some clinical material that described our mental condition. I'm going to show you in a little bit. Next slide. Black men face significant challenges compared to other groups, including what? Economic, healthcare, and educational disparities, as well as systemic racism and social injustice. Despite nationwide protests following a police officer's murder of George Floyd in 2020, for example, between 2 and 3 times as many Black Americans continue to die at the hands of police as white Americans, to Statistica, a data analytics organization. And, it's with all that went on with the George Floyd case, and all of us witnessed the protests around this country. Matter of fact, I was a part of some of those protests. We had several in New York City. We had them all around this nation. You would think that in light of all of the public outcry and protests, that there would have been a definite change of attitude towards how you treat Black Americans, especially Black men in this nation. As a matter of fact, it's so shameful. Unfortunately, even some of our own police officers and Black police officers that should know better, okay, are perpetrating some of the same patterns of behavior as their white fellow officers, as we saw not too long ago in that very sorrowful situation that occurred in Georgia, outside of Atlanta, Georgia, where those Black police officers just about beat that poor man to death. It's sad. The stigma and the stereotype still exists in our society when it comes to African American men. It's just the way it is. Next. Sadly, and perhaps not surprisingly, suicide rates among Black men are also climbing. For the first time, so-called deaths of despair, death from suicide, alcohol use, and drug overdoses are now higher among blacks than whites, tripling from 36.24 per 100,000 people in 2013 to 103.80 per 100,000 people in 2022. Okay, this is just statistical data to set the tone for some things we're going to say a little later. But the fact of the matter is, black people were not known for individuals who would really go the suicide way. We have been known to be people to endure, to be strong, to be quite resilient, but beginning to see that as the pressures of life crowd in among us, on us, that a lot of our people decided that they just can't take it anymore and they're thrown in the towel. And that's so unfortunate. They call it deaths of despair. Next slide. Poverty, racism, and related factors also mean that when Black men or boys seek to receive mental health services, they are often met with overt and covert barriers. These include implicit bias and attendant behaviors on the part of medical providers, and lack of access to quality psychological and psychiatric services. Compared with white people, for example, Black people are less likely to receive guideline consistent care or to be included in mental health research. They are more likely in turn to use emergency rooms or primary care for mental health problems because they have not received appropriate preventative services. Let me say a little something about this. There's always been some issues when it comes to Black people, especially Black men, and the clinical or psychoanalytical community. Sometimes because of the stereotypes that's in society, that has been imposed and projected on Black people, especially Black men. Matter of fact, years ago, and I mean, many of you perhaps have heard this, there was a gentleman from Chicago. His name was Jawanza Kunjufu. He wrote a very interesting book about how young Black boys are destroyed from the time they're really in third grade, third and fourth grade. The mental health community has destroyed them, because what happens is, because many times they may be energetic and a little more animated and in class and so forth. Many of them have been put in special ed classes and even subject to taking medication. And as a result, when you go back and see what happens with how African Americans have been treated by the clinical community, it has also caused a lot of Black people to be very suspicious about going to see psychiatrists and going to see psychologists. As a matter of fact, as a counselor myself, I noticed that some of the hardest people to get into any kind of counseling are Black men. They just resist it. Okay, and some of it has to do with the stereotypical view that the clinical community has had about African American men for decades, and some of it has to do with the fact that many of these clinicians really don't understand us. They don't understand what racism has done to us. They don't understand what living in poverty, how it has affected us. They don't understand these things. And so therefore, in terms of receiving the kind of quality mental health services that helps Black men, has been lacking there. Next slide. Now, as a result of this, what does this lead to among Black men? Feelings of hopelessness. Now, I'm going to invite y'all to talk a little bit here, because these are areas of feelings where we look at how Black men feel inside. What do we mean by feelings of hopelessness? Somebody can respond to that. What do we mean by that? What do we mean by feelings of hopelessness? Is it okay for folk to respond, Mr. Chairman? Pastor?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Feelings of hopelessness. What are we saying when we say that? Somebody speak to me and describe what that is.
They don't see a future for themselves. They're trying many different things. You hear me?
Yeah, we hear you now, loud and clear. I want feedback. So feeling, in other words, they don't feel there is a brighter tomorrow. Is that what you're trying to say? Anybody else?
Right. They don't feel right. They don't feel that as there are options for them for a job. They've tried jobs and they lost jobs and education. I think education is another factor in why they may feel this hopelessness, because if the teachers don't pay attention to the students, or they won't call on the student, or they think the student is not capable of learning, then a student may feel hopeless. I feel that nothing is going to wait, I'm trying to get my thoughts together as I talk. I'm not going to make it. Things are not working out for me. And therefore.
Very good. I like what you said. I think I'm not going to make it. Okay. I think that phrase right there hits the nail right on the head. I don't think I'm going to make it. So what's the use? How do you feel inside?
Right.
Engaging in risky behavior. What do we mean by that? What's going on there?
Are there others on the line?
Yeah, come on with the rest of them.
I think that
I want to wake y'all up. Engaging in risky behavior.
So hopelessness has to do with also existence. And so when you don't think that your existence is no longer valuable, then you engage in risky behavior, not caring what happens. And so that's how I look at that when you're hopeless and feeling hopeless.
Risky, but for instance, now right here in Brooklyn, I'm pretty sure you have this situation up in New England, Norwich up there. One of the things that we see often, a lot of young people are part of gangs. And they join
that's what I'm about to say. That was my stuff. Yeah,
because it's a sense of belonging, and they will carry weapons. They will carry out what the OG tells them to do, even though it's crazy. They will risk their lives because they feel that's all they have. Risky behavior, and we see that so often. Sleeping too much or too what? Little. And I hear a lot of mothers complaining. You stay home in your bed all day. Why don't you get up, go out and get a job? I heard a lot of mothers say that. Get up, go out and get a job. And they're sleeping a lot. Why? Because they are hiding from what they're experiencing in their personal life. And that next dovetails into the next one. What? Withdrawing from family
and friends,
right? They don't associate with you. As a matter of fact, we've discovered that a lot of young boys, after they reach a certain age, if you notice some of the most friendly, warm, engaging people you want to meet are little boys. Boys. You ever notice that? Little boys are loving and kind. It's very hard for you to find a mean little boy. Okay. But most of the little boys they're loving and kind, and then they reach a certain age.
12. Right? I tell people it's 12. When they reach 12,
they just retreat. They retreat because they don't feel that their family understands what they're going through. You follow? And so they're on a quest to see who they can hang with. Then, of course, is what? Extreme what? Mood swings. Extreme mood swings. We're going to talk about that a little later when we go down to another subject I have down here. Job or what? Financial loss. If there's ever one group of individuals that are hit hard, it's Black men. When it comes to
Important.
jobs and financial success. And
Mhm.
let me be very honest. Y'all might take issue with what I'm going to say. Sometimes our society will elevate women more than our men. They'll do it. Yeah, I'm serious. They'll promote women. They will not promote men. And sometimes
True.
it's
True.
because they don't want it. They don't want black men to be competing with them. They don't
Right.
want. And so
Mhm.
they'll put black men on a lower totem pole so that they're not in that competitive zone where
Yeah.
the white man has to, and they'll give jobs to our women, empower
Mhm.
them while they stay in control, but they will do that. And sometimes a lot of black men aren't given the same fair opportunities. It's just the way it is. Loss of what?
Could that be because they speak out? Women sometimes speak out. They're gonna say, you've been raised by not giving me that job. Whereas a guy probably will, retreat within himself and just not say anything. So there are
Point.
other
Very point. What do we mean by loss of relationships? Let's bring that home.
Mhm.
Loss of relationships.
Can I speak, Dr. Martin?
We want to hear you. Come on.
Yes, I am an educator in the public schools. And when you speak to the feeling of hopelessness and our little boys in 4th grade and 5th grade, I'm middle school, and I do work with students who are identified as having special needs. So that speaks to what I do every day. What I have also noted when I was more engaged in an adolescence phase of the church, that even though the church, and I'm sure you represent the church, recognize this feelings of lack of relationship and lack of identity, because we know that in the Black homes, we have fewer dads, fewer role models, and yet and still the church does not address this in terms of becoming mentors to boys and I know as I work as a guidance counselor in the public schools also, I tried to connect with our church, which was my church at the time, and tried to solicit mentors for students who were missing dads or missing model brothers. So this is really critical, those middle school years when we have a great opportunity to saving our children. So yes, there's not even, you're talking about loss of relationship, there probably was no relationship.
Exactly.
And most of your educators in the elementary schools are women. So there you don't have that connection, because a woman, regardless of how great she is, a mom, regardless of how great she is, she cannot be a dad. She's not made to be a dad. That's why the Lord created man and female. So that's missing at a very early age. So they don't even have a relationship. And I recognize that when boys, and they know when you care, even when you are strict, and I know I'm pretty firm, I especially boys of color, and I'm thinking of our Hispanic kid. He knew I was very firm, and I would fuss at him when he did the wrong thing and praise him when he did the great. Those things are great, but he recognized that strictness was out of love and care. And I talked to him personally about my expectation and what I see the possibility in him. So they don't even have relationships, not to mention losing the relationship. They need a connection.
Wow.
And women, especially we see it in girls, yes, but especially do we see it in our boys. And
Right.
a woman just cannot be a man. We cannot take the men's place. And so it behooves our men to recognize, and not just recognize it, but do something, be active.
You've made a lot of points, and we're going to come back to the role of the church in a bit. But when we talk about loss of relationship, I think there's so many aspects to that. We speak in terms of, as you mentioned, from our little boys as they're growing up, when they're looking for somebody to bond with who understands what it is to be a developing male. Sometimes there's a lack there. You don't have a lot of that. They come from families headed by females, and I take off my hat to these women who've done a magnificent job trying to provide guidance as a mother and as a father too. But that young male wants to relate to someone, and sometimes the relational issues that he's experienced at that young age manifests itself in a later time when it comes time for him to have a relationship, let's say, with a woman for marriage. Because one of the problems we find in our community is when you look at groups that marry, unfortunately, we're discovering that we're at, again, African Americans are marrying less than everybody else. Okay. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, when we look at the male who's typically supposed to be, God has positioned to be at least to provide the leadership in the home. If they don't have a job, if they're strung out on the street, what kind of leadership they're going to give? Where does that leave them for having constructive, beneficial relationships for our women? Follow? So let me look at alcohol and substance abuse disorders. Okay, even though when it comes to drug usage, we know that whites use more drugs than blacks. Even though they don't say that, they do. Okay, they put it on us, but that's not true. White people are more heavier drug users, but that does not negate the fact that heavy substance abuse disorder exists among our men. Okay, and right in New York City, I noticed that when they legalized the use of marijuana, every day those kids would show up at those stores and just stocking up before they go to school. You walk down the street, you can smell the marijuana. You can just smell it all over the place, and a lot of our young men are almost are psychologically addicted to it. You walk around, that's all they want to do is smoke, they got to have that hit. You know what I mean? And prolonged periods of isolation, okay? Wanting to be by themselves. And then the other part here, express feelings of being what? Trapped. Okay?
Elder, can I stop you for a second? Can
Go
I
ahead.
stop you?
Go ahead.
I think when we prepare these discussions, should have maybe one or two subjects just to focus on, because we're going too fast, and I think people have questions and concerns that are being overlooked or not being dealt with the way it should be. And I think the purpose of this session is to really try to get to the bottom of certain things, and basically how the church
I
can
got you. I got you. What I'm really doing, I'm giving you an overview. I do not intend to be exhaustive tonight. I'm just giving you an overview, and you will have to take some of this further. I'm giving you homework to do. I'm raising the issues, and you got to take it from here. You got it? All right. I hear you. Because I'm kind of just dealing with mental health from an overview. There's so many aspects to it, and I don't know which one you want to focus on. So I'm giving you an overview, okay? And then from later on, you can break it down and be a little more specific. All right. And then agitation, anxiety, and restlessness. And then I stopped at express feelings of being trapped. Okay. And that, what that means. That means they just feel, look, as we said earlier, feelings of hopelessness, there's no way out. Next slide. All right. Now, the clinical community has broken down the three major issues facing Black men into these three areas. As a result of all that we looked at: depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. Okay. And each one of these, like my brother has stated, is a separate subject in and of itself. All right. Which we can't exhaust. But I'm just sharing with you, this is what the mental health community is saying. Depression after all that we experience, isolation, substance abuse, lack of job, racism, all of it leads to, at times, depression. All right, where you just withdraw into yourself. Depression, we understand from a clinical point of view, is self-directed anger. That's what we mean by depression. You're angry at yourself because there's a state of hopelessness. Then anxiety is where we act out in unconstructive ways, that which does not help us in order to deal with our issues. Then, of course, bipolar disorder is more clinical. That has to do with severe mood swings that we face. Some people are up one moment, down another. Okay, bipolar. Sometimes clinicians have to treat that with medication. Next slide. All right. Next slide. Did you hear me, Pastor? Okay. All right. Now here's something that's happening in our community that we haven't seen before, and that is COVID-19 pandemic has contributed to higher suicide rates. As I said, we are seeing a greater increase of Black men as relates to suicide attempts than any other racial group. It has been found that suicide rates in Black male adolescents increased by 47% from 2013 to 2019. Black suicidologists say it's partially due to racism. Next slide. I'm trying to cover as much as I can, All right. 62.8% of Black people in the United States receive mental health services. Still many African Americans refuse to seek out help for suicidal ideation. That means they have suicidal tendencies, they still won't go to receive the kind of help that we need. And we look at suicide, even though in modern times it hasn't been something we've chosen, but all the way back to slavery, we recognize that when the slaves were on ships, coming here, they were uncertain of the destiny where they were going. They heard horrible stories of what they would face once they got to America. So many of them just decided to jump off the ship. And what they would do to prevent that, they actually had nets around the sides of the ships to prevent the Black slaves from jumping overboard because they were afraid. They figured that it didn't make any sense. Their life didn't mean anything anymore once they were enslaved and taken captive. And then at times they even had devices that they would use in order to force us to eat because we refused to eat because of suicidal tendency. It's amazing that in these modern times, here again, due to what's happening in society, a lot of Black people are looking at a way out in suicide. Next slide. All right. I want to talk a little bit about this here. Major contributing factor to mental health crisis in African Americans. Now, here's where my personal research comes in. I did my dissertation. I did something strange, really. I attended a Jewish university to do my doctorate in pastoral counseling, pastoral care. And so I had to do psychology and all that there. And I decided to do my dissertation. My dissertation right there is called Developing Positive Masculine Identity in Adolescent African American Males Through a Rite of Passage Ministry. Okay. In my research, trying to find clinical material that really explained the condition of Black men, I was faced with a lot of challenges. There was some material, but not all the material that I really wanted that helped me to deal with what I was actually trying to focus on. And I was able to meet one lady, and her and I struck up a relationship where she was a brilliant woman. Now, she developed something very, very unique. It's a big word, and I'm just sharing it with you. It's not, it means something very simple. She developed a theory called a phenomenological variant of an ecological systems theory. Here's what it means in short. Environmental factors contribute to one's mental health. Follow? Other words,
Absolutely. Where you live. Yep.
the environment that you grow up in,
Mhm.
it affects you. If I grow up in the inner city and all I know, all I see around me are people being shot, using guns, taking drugs, doing this, that's all I see. That's the environment. If I go to school, and I don't go to the best schools, but I go to school where for the most part the teachers don't even care about me, all of those factors contribute to what you are going to develop to become. And it affects your mental health in days ahead. That's essentially what you were saying. And I agree with that. Okay.
Mhm.
And the thing that has to happen with us as our community, here's where the church comes. Next slide. I want to get to the church and what we have to do about this. All right. And that is again, Eurocentric approaches to medicine have contributed to a lack of trust in the Black community. Black people have been experimented on, dissected by medical professionals from, oh, you remember that lady back that they exploited. She was from Africa. Venus Hottentot was her name. And because she was kind of well developed, they took advantage of her. They dissected her body, all kinds of things. The point with the Tuskegee experiment. So mental health is still what? Still new to Black folks. The language and research around mental health is very Eurocentric. It was not made for Blacks. But y'all,
Right.
did y'all get that?
Yeah.
The mental
Mhm.
health and a lot of the theories. So it's fun. It's time now. And what's been happening lately is we have more Black clinicians who are emerging, but we still don't have enough, truth be told. Not enough Black counselors, not enough Black psychiatrists, not enough
Mhm.
Black psychologists to look at that which specifically addresses the unique mental health issues that we face as a people. Very, very important. Next slide. And I think this is what I want. Okay, now this is what I wanted to get to. Okay, so y'all brought it up, and I'm see if we can talk a little bit about it. What can the church do to address this crisis? Now, I heard my sister speaking about this, and I wanted to get to that. This is where you're at as a church. That's why I'm so glad that you're having a program like this. This is a wonderful thing, and I hope you do more of them. The church needs to be what? More, as my sister stated, she stated better than I could. The church needs to be more aware of what
Yes,
men
men
are what facing.
facing.
We need to be aware of it. We need to pay attention to it. Other words, when brother so-and-so comes to church and maybe he's acting like a nut, he doesn't seem like his head's tight, something's wrong there. Maybe there's something else going on inside of him. You follow? And the behavior that we see being reflected on the surface is just symptomatic that something else is going on inside of him. That makes sense? Everybody with me? Okay? Must provide what? A sensitive, caring, nurturing environment. That's what we need to do. Be a referral center connecting Black men to where they can find what? Treatment. Now, this is very, very important, and that is what we need to start doing as a church is we need to identify who can provide, let's say, clinical treatment for people in our church who are in need. We need to look at that. Okay, you should know whoever. I don't know what we got up in New London or in Norwich, but if there's a counselor, if there's a therapist, somebody that we can vet, and we can't send them to everybody because some of these therapists are not always the best people for you to go to. All right, they got to be vetted. You just don't send them to anybody. They ought to be vetted. Okay, hosting rite of passage programs for developing young men. And that's what I focused on in my dissertation, rite of passage in the church. And the Adventist Church is so fortunate because what we have is the Pathfinder Club, which is essentially, in its own way, a type of rite of passage program for young people. It's really a good program. It really is. The Pathfinder program we have in the Adventist Church. It's one of the best youth programs anywhere because it is a type of rite of passage. It's just that at times, whenever we do programs in church, we ought to make certain that we create some degree of cultural awareness so that what happens is it helps our young men to identify with their uniqueness as a Black male in society. All right. I know when I had my I did rite of passage. I actually did as part of my study program, and I took some young men in my church, and for a short period of time, what I did with them was I actually gave them a new African name. Everybody had an African name, okay? And the African name was synonymous with something unique in their character, and they had to develop that quality in their character as part of their journey towards adulthood. That's what we did. And that helped them to identify, say, wait a minute now. And you know, I go back now, and the young men that were in the program with me, I've noticed that they have developed into positive, constructive citizens of society. Many of them are married, they have children, they take care of their families, you know, and that's what we wanted. And see, what I'm saying is, in our church, when they're at a young age is when we need to start, okay? And that means we have to look at ministries that look at our young people, look at our young men in particular, and see how we can nurture and guide them and help them to develop what I call positive masculine identity, okay? And then creating support groups and men's ministry, because let's face it, not only we talk about young men, some of our senior men in church have some challenges that people don't pay attention to. And I think it's wonderful for men to get together and men to have an opportunity where they can spend time there. And when I was at Mount of Olives, one of the things I did there, folk wondered if I was a pastor sometimes. I worked hard in that church. I mean, I go in there. You remember all the all of the putting in the wall, all of that, the insulation. I actually, with a few men in that church, put the insulation in that wall. We did it. We blew it in. But you know what? I had also a wonderful bonding experience with some of the young men in church. There were a lot of us, and I didn't realize it. By us hanging together, we work together, we go fishing together, we do things like that. But those type of activities help the individuals that I was working with in that church. I return and see them leaders today in that church. I'm glad to see that, you know, because, you know, what we need to do is spend time with our men and spend time, quality time together, not just, and sometimes, you know, we get all caught up on the preaching thing. Not always preaching. It's not always the Bible studies are important. We ought to take the Bible and look at that which relates to helping our men to have a better mental health outlook. Don't get me wrong. But in addition to that, there ought to be some practical aspects, okay, where we do things constructively with our men, all right? So that so that they feel that the church has something for them. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I noticed that one of the groups that Black men join, a lot of Black men are Masons, right?
Right.
As a matter of fact, some of your husbands are Masons. Yeah. And why do they join that organization? Why? Okay, I heard it's a secret society, and they got certain secrets that they keep amongst themselves. But there's something about it that elevates masculine pride. Are you following what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Masculine pride. And it creates a sense of belonging for them. You know, especially a lot of Black men felt there was no place they could go in society. So therefore what? I'm a Mason, okay? I've got power. I've got respect. I have my Mason ring on. And when I run into a brother that's a fellow Mason, we got that connection between us. Underneath that, what I'm saying, underneath that is this whole issue of dealing with their self-esteem and their pride, and it becomes a safety net to a degree that protects them from what they experience in society. We may not look at it that way, but I'm saying from a clinical, let's say psychological point of view, it is one of the reasons why they join these secret societies, for that reason. It helps them with their own masculine identity. Okay, constructive social activities and empowering ministries. All right, Pastor gave me an hour, and I put all this stuff together here. You know, now I'm going a little too long. Go ahead now. Go to the next slide. In the Bible, because I as a preacher I have to always use the word as a point of reference. In the Bible, remember the story of the man that was at the pool of Bethesda.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
The man was there all these years,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm pretty sure he was depressed. I'm pretty sure he had anxiety. He might even had bipolar, because he certainly felt as if he was isolated. He felt as if he was lonely and nobody cared about him. He felt that he had no meaning and worth in life. He didn't say he had a wife. We don't know anything about that in the text and say that, but he didn't say he had children. But the fact of the matter is, he was a lonely, depressed soul, sitting there all those years until Jesus came along. Right? And Jesus gave him what he'd been longing for. What I'm trying to say in this is, I see the church doing the same thing for Black men. Are y'all with me?
Amen.
Giving our men a sense of pride and dignity and hopefulness in a society that doesn't affirm their manhood and their uniqueness. I think that's important. Next slide, two Spirit Prophecy quotes, and then there's something I want you to see. All right? Now, Pastor, I told you I didn't know how long I was going to be, but you told me to come prepared, so I came with a lot of stuff. Too much. All right? Now, Jesus said, come unto me, what? All ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will what? Give you rest.
Give you rest.
I yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am what? Meek and lowly in heart.
Lonely in heart.
You shall find rest unto your souls. You see, there is a yoke to bear. Now is the very faith that we want. A faith that what? Will grasp the promises of God. One that will take the yoke of Christ and bear the burdens that he would have us. We often think we are having a hard time in bearing burdens. And it is too often the case, because God has not made any provision for us to carry these burdens. But we bear his yoke and carry his burdens. We can testify that the yoke of Christ is what? Easy. And his burdens are light, because he has made provision for these. But when you feel, look at the words there, what? Feeling words, depressed and discouraged. Do not what? Give up the battle. You have a living Savior that will help you. You will have rest in him. Okay? It says, you must put your neck under the yoke of fashion. Okay, you must not put your neck under the yoke of fashion, the yoke that God has never designed that you should bear. It is not our work to study how to meet the world standards, but the great question with each one should be, how can I meet God's standards? Okay? Then you will find rest to the souls, for Christ has said, my yoke is easy. Next slide, and we're finished. It says here, when depression's what? Settles upon the soul, it is no evidence that God has changed. He is the same what? Yesterday and today and forever. You are sure of the favor of God when you are sensible of the beams of the Son of Righteousness. But if the clouds sweep over your soul, you must not feel that you are
forsaken. Amen. Wow.
Your faith must pierce the gloom. Your eye must be what? Single. Whole body shall be full of light. The riches of the grace of Christ must be kept before the mind. Treasure up the lessons that his love provides. Let your faith be like Job's, that you may declare, though he slay me, yet will I trust.
I trust him.
Lay hold on the promises of your heavenly Father, and remember his former dealings with you and with his servants. For all things work together for the good of to them that love God. All right. Well, I know I've taken a lot of time. I really didn't know which aspect to my brother who said we should have had just 1 or 2 points. Maybe you have a point there. I didn't know which to cover, so I came with a general overview. Okay, so I hope you all don't mind that if I cover too much material, but I'm giving you some more homework, some things for you to work on. This presentation is made available to Pastor, and he can use it at his own discretion. But I have no problem. You can review it, use it, break it down, okay, so that you can look at certain aspects. I want you to see something. Go to the next slide, sir, and then we're done. I want you to see something. If you don't mind, Pastor, I'd like to turn to this video. It's a presentation and a discussion hosted by Susan Rice. I thought this was very interesting and be interesting for you to see and hear. Susan Rice, the domestic policy advisor for our outgoing President Biden. She worked for him, and this is something
that's who I thought you were talking about. Okay.
Right. If you can play that for us, Pastor, if you can. It's not long, but I think it fits in what we're saying here. I think it's very good for our to watch.
You're referring to the one that you sent me?
Yes, play that. That's what I put that there for.
Hold on.
Any volume?
Or to tackle our mental health crisis. And for our participants for taking the time to join us today. We're very grateful to have you. I'm Susan Rice, President Biden's domestic policy advisor. As the president shared during his State of the Union address, we have to do more to tackle our mental health crisis, especially for our children and young people. Every day, I see how mental health challenges, often exacerbated by social media and other factors, are a force multiplier across so many of our most pressing challenges as a nation, compounding issues such as our labor shortage, homelessness, and criminal justice. And I also see this as the mother of 2 young adults. This crisis is increasingly acute among young Black men. Nearly 40% of Black teenagers say they struggle with persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. And 22% of Black teenagers reported seriously considering suicide. In 2019, 8.5% of Black high school students attempted suicide, while 6.4% of white students did. And in 2018, 9% of Black men reported feeling sad, while 6.9% of white men reported the same. Suicide rates among Black Americans between the ages of 10 and 24 years old have increased 36% over the past 3 years. As compared with white Americans, half as many Black Americans who need mental health treatment get such treatment, according to the National Institutes of Health. We know that young Black men face structural racism, which results in trauma that follows them throughout their lives. And we know that getting help can be more challenging for men compared to women. So what are we doing? We're building a system with enough capacity and the right competencies to treat everyone. We're connecting people to the culturally competent and trauma-informed services that they need by tackling high costs and other barriers. We're creating environments that support mental health and well-being in school or online. We're making help more accessible and confidential by enabling you to dial or text 988, the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Thanks to these efforts by the Biden administration, now schools are able to hire more counselors, more nurses, and social workers, and more underserved young Americans can access mental health providers. More dedicated staff are answering the phones at crisis call centers. But this is just the beginning, and obviously it's not nearly enough. We have a lot to learn from our young people. And so that's why I am so thrilled to be at this roundtable today with my colleague and friend, Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy, and our participants, Naheem Banks, Miles Noble, and Dr. Arthur Evans of the American Psychological Association. I'll now hand it off to the Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy.
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador Rice. And it has been wonderful to have you as a friend and partner in these efforts to address mental health. I'm also so glad that we are here today to talk about mental health and specifically about mental health and young Black men. You know, I was thinking back to my own personal experiences with mental health. As a child growing up, recognizing that I was different from a lot of the folks around me, recognizing that my skin color was different, my parents' cultural background was different. So much was different in my life that made me feel like I didn't quite fit in. And I struggled with my mental health during that time, but I also didn't tell anybody about it. My parents loved me, but I never told them. My sister loved me, I never told her. And it's because I felt a sense of shame, a shame that too many people feel when it comes to their mental health and well-being. And that's part of what we're trying to change. You know, that shame persisted for a long time. Years later, I still remember being at the dining table as a high school student doing my homework on a Sunday when the phone rang, and picking up that phone and learning that my uncle had taken his own life in just a few miles away from us in a home he lived in. And I didn't know how to process that. But I also, in the days that followed, I saw how my family didn't really know how to process that. We didn't know how to talk about it with others. We felt a sense of guilt and shame. Again, a sense of shame that too many families feel we're dealing with suicide. You know, it's taken us a long time to recognize as a country that mental health is health, that it's no less important than our physical health. And it's something we should be able to talk about as openly and as honestly as we would talk about a broken ankle or a sprained wrist. And we've got some ground to cover there because mental health at the end of the day is not just one thing on the side for us to worry about. It is our fuel that allows us to show up in the world for our family, at work, at school. And if our fuel tank is low, if our mental health is suffering, we can't show up in the way we want to in the world. The fact that so many people are struggling with their mental health right now, and it really is unfortunately a monumental struggle for many communities. This puts not just our health, but also our economies and our communities at risk. And you know, this is particularly true in the Black community, where sadly, in the last few years, we've seen a 36% increase in the suicide rate among young Black people. We've also seen that young Black men are more likely to die by suicide than Black women, and they're much less likely to ask for help than their white counterparts. This is part of what we've got to change. You know, all this is happening against a backdrop of a broader youth mental health crisis, where the strain, of and stresses really of COVID-19, of violence in communities, particularly gun violence, where the adverse impacts of racism and systemic discrimination, and as well as where the adverse impacts of technology at times, particularly social media, have really conspired and come together to really hurt the mental health and well-being of young people in America. And that's why we've got to take action. That's why we've got to make sure that the future is different than the past. This is about fundamentally changing this status quo. And to do that, we want to build a movement around mental health, one that is firmly centered around the needs of young people and that has them at the table. And that's why I'm really grateful that President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Ambassador Rice and others, in the administration have really made this a priority, because we all recognize that without our mental health, we can't be who we need to be. We can't show up as our best selves. So I'm grateful to have all of you here. As Ambassador Rice mentioned, for this conversation, we do have Dr. Evans with us. Arthur Evans is the CEO and Executive Vice President of the American Psychological Association.
All right. Well, Brother Pastor, the Saints are ready to go.
Yes, Dr. Martin, we just want to say thank you, man. Thank you for on the wonderful information. I'm gonna definitely I'm gonna exhaust what you have sent to me. definitely delve deeper into it and try to implement, especially what the church can do towards aiding the youth and also our community surrounding mental health. Just want to see if there's any questions. Does
Right.
anybody?
Yeah, I was going to say that because I told the pastor because of what I'm doing right now. I really didn't have too much time, but I got into it and I put some stuff together. So I wanted to give you. I like to always come with a double barrel shotgun. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah. You said you certainly blessed
AK,
us. You certainly
AK.
blessed us. So
Well, I don't mind taking a couple of questions. You know, as much as I can or whatever. I'll do what I can to help. Any couple of questions anybody want to ask? I know. I'll try to answer. Do what I can. Okay.
are there any comments? If there's no questions, are there any comments?
No, I really enjoyed the presentation. You presented exactly what I was looking for. It wasn't a session where you're trying to resolve or solve problems. There's so much going on in the black male, and like he said, Pastor Martin said that Black folks don't like to go to psychologists or psychiatrists or therapists too much because a lot of times we can't find a Black psychologist or therapist, like you say. But, definitely we don't want to go to the white one to talk about issues they caused upon us. So I think that's what we don't feel comfortable talking about issues that we have lived in the past, like, racism and segregation and the Jim Crow and discrimination and all those situations that was brought up on the African Americans, and we don't want to talk about it. I would love to have a psychologist, a therapist, or somebody who can understand my issues. I do have issues because, I came from that period. So if I could find somebody who understand, I know my daughter keeps telling me I need somebody, but I think I feel comfortable with somebody in my age who understand, who live that, and we can express it. I can express it more about what I'm looking for.
Let me respond to that a little bit. Fortunately, there are more African American clinicians available today than in the past. We've really come a long way with this. It's bad, and a lot of clinical work now, because you may not have a clinician in your area where you reside, but a lot of clinical work can be done by Zoom, just like we're doing now. That's how a lot of clinical work is done, so that we can have more access to individuals by this methodology. It's always better if they're in person, but if you can't get them in person, there are ways to get them online, just like this, where you can talk to somebody. We have more available today than we had. Let me trust you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't before. And so I think what the church has to do is look into finding who is available for our people. You follow? And we have sort of like the church should be like a resource center where we refer people to individuals who can help. Because even though I'm a counselor myself, and as a pastor sometimes in church, I wouldn't take counsel. Certain things I wouldn't do. I just wouldn't do it. And it's not because I didn't want to help the people. It's just that what happens when you're getting to a counseling encounter, the individual who's speaking and sharing is going to sometimes share with you very intimate personal details about in their lives. Okay. Mm-hmm. As a pastor, as your pastor, you don't want to see me every week after you've talked to me about all the details, gory details inside your personal life. You understand what I'm saying? You may not feel being in my presence. You follow. And so sometimes I would do surface stuff, but then when it comes to some real deep issues, if I hear that, I will send. I'd rather you go to a person where just that person and you are able to talk, and it's a safe environment. When I say safe, not that I'm going to talk about your business, because preachers always get, the reputation for telling what everybody says to them up in the pulpit.
It will become a topic of your sermon, right?
Right. So that people get upset about that, and they have a right. But what I'm saying is, what you're looking for is a safe area where your comfort level is of such that you feel, and I get in this counseling encounter, I can tell this counselor anything and it stays right there. You follow? That's what people are looking for. And I think that's an absolute necessity. All right. You got one more question, Pastor? And then they'll wrap it and let the folk go home.
Dr. Martin.
Yes, yes.
Like your presentation, Dr. Martin. One question I had, do you have any books that you can recommend to mentors or teachers or anybody in position that are dealing with youth that may be facing depression or anxiety? I tend to see adults, especially older adults, they just take that strong position. Do what I say and that's it.
And I think you have raised a salient point. Thank you, my brother, for what you were saying, because in our church, we always have to recognize that we have different generations in our church. Okay. I'm a baby boomer. Okay. But then in my church, I've got millennials, I've got Generation X, I've got all these baby bus, all these different generations are coexisting in our congregations. They're all there, right in front of you. Okay. And we see things differently. All right. Our young people see totally different from the way we see them. See. And sometimes, even though we're trying to mentor them, we may not understand how that generation is thinking, how they're feeling, how they're processing information. That they've even now looked at kids who are little babies, and these little babies can get on that computer, they can get on your cell phone, and even though no one has taught them, they know more about that cell phone than you do. They know more about these gadgets than you do. Something in them where they're almost intrinsically wired to deal with that stuff. I take my cell phone, I'm trying to figure out what's on there. I can call, I can email, I can text. What all the other stuff on there, I have no idea what it is. I don't know what it is. Okay, some of y'all are laughing, but you're the same shape I'm in. Okay.
Oh, I am too. Absolutely.
But I'm just using it as an example of how generations are different in our church, and sometimes emotionally speaking, they see things differently. And I think what we need to do, my brother, I'll have to look in to see what I can find for you, okay, and share it with Pastor Perry. Because you asked the question, I think it's a very good question, and it shows that your heart's in the right place. What you're trying to do is find that which would guide you into how you can relate better to the generation you're trying to mentor, and which I think is outstanding. All right. That's what we need to see more of from people in our church, to take that kind of posture in order to help our young people. Okay. But we'll look to see what we can find for you. All right. Thank you. Any other questions?
I saw Brother Tony. Brother Tony's been having his hand raised for a while now. Go ahead, Brother Tony.
Yes, Doctor. I'm actually a Native American, Mexican American male. Although I grew up in a Black community. In fact, I was in a couple of foster homes with Black families as a kid. And so I've experienced some of the same things and have been called some of the same names. And I think one of the things that I have found difficult over the years and discouraging is the efforts at trying to dismantle this system that discriminates against people. But I think the thing that has often bothered me is what seems to be this effort to find a solution or solutions that is in fact separate and apart from the root causes of these problems. Do you find that to be an issue?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. You know, of course, we mentioned several of them tonight, because even in our society, much as we've made a lot of progress, we've come a long way in America. Still, racism still raises its ugly head.
Mm-hmm.
Case in point, not to get into a thing here, but if you're watching what's happening with this president election, underneath the covers of this is a whole lot of racism. Let's be honest. Let's say it the way it is. You know, I'm driving down the street today, and in my neighborhood, and I see this Caucasian brother, and I'm not calling all our Caucasian brothers as bad people. I don't want anybody to misunderstand me here. A lot of our white brothers are wonderful people. We know that. Okay, just as we got other soul brothers, they ain't too great. We know that. Okay, driving down my street. So here comes this Caucasian brother with a great big pickup truck, and he's got these two big flags.
American flags, yeah.
Trump on one and the other, and you know, and I know he's parading this because in their minds, what's happened in our country is a lot of the white males now. We talk about black males going through issues. A lot of white males are also having some issues now because they feel this is not their country anymore. They feel that and one of the reasons why they're so much behind Trump, if they say make America great again, what they're thinking about is, hey, listen, we're not the privileged guys we used to be in this country anymore. That's been taken away from us, and we want somebody to give it back to us. That's what these guys are up to. That's what they're thinking. You follow what I'm saying? That's what they're looking inside. And so what you're saying, my brother, even though this is 2024, some of the same issues that created stuff in our country, unfortunately, is still there. We're still wrestling with it. We're still dealing with it. And I think one of the things the Black church, and when I say the church Black in the church we attend, we have to help our people to learn to be resilient. That's the word. The word is resilient. That's the clinical term we use. We have to develop a sense of resilience. Now, throughout our slave experience, it's one of the things that's kept us so strong over these years because we never would have made it. It's a miracle that we've even survived as a people. But the fact of the matter is, under the circumstances, we have learned as a people to be resilient, be strong, to overcome so much. And a lot of it has to do with our faith that has been anchored in God for these centuries that we've been in this country.
Well, Doctor, if you wouldn't mind me allowing me to use your point about resiliency as a segue into what will be my final comment. I have said for years that you cannot legislate what is in a man's heart. If his heart is filled with hate, you can pass all the laws in the world. It's not going to change who or what he is, which for me then raises the next question: where do you go from there?
Okay, where do you think we ought to go from here?
My personal opinion is to focus inward. I cannot allow myself to be controlled by the ignorance of somebody else. I have to find a way. I have to find a solution based upon what I know my experiences to be to raise myself up. If I sit and wait for that guy who hates me to come up with a solution to fix his hate, it's never going to happen.
I think your point, how you just responded to it, is definitely profound. That's right. In other words, we have to, inside of us, through the power of Christ and the gospel, develop a sense of resilience so that we can cope. And I think that's what's missing in our communities, because when the forces come in all around us, what's inside us to hold us and to keep us to follow. And I think that's where the church comes in. The church is so instrumental in that sense, in helping us to develop resilience. And by resilience, we mean a coping strategy for dealing with what we face in society. Well, Pastor, I'm gonna stop right there. I've had a wonderful time here. I enjoyed talking with everybody. Okay, and I see you got a lot. I'm giving you a lot of work to do.
It's all right.
Get the book, brother. He asked us. Promise. Okay.
Yeah, that's my cousin, by the way, who asked you about the book. So I'm gonna definitely get it to him once you send it to me. So I'll make sure I send it.
God bless everybody.
God bless. Good job, doctor.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Bye.
Wonderful.
Let's
Have
just
a safe trip to Florida.
All right. Y'all take care now. Bye-bye.
yes. We're gonna